Hello, everyone. Welcome to JKL Media, your podcast for all things pop culture. Joining me on stage is Lou.
Hello, everyone.
Karen.
Hello.
And I am Jesse Jackson. I guess, are we on the stage? Are we in the apartment? Are we in the airport? Or maybe we're all three. We are continuing our discussion with Station 11. The miniseries, and we are reaching episodes 7 and 8. Goodbye, My Damaged Home, and Who's There? I'm going to say right off the bat, these were really two good episodes. Episode 7, I've told the story ultimate times on this thing where I was going, why am I still watching this? And people said, stick with it. And 7, at first I was a little confused. And then by the end of it, I'm like, okay, I am locked in. And then with 8, I went, oh my goodness, I am so glad I've stuck with this. Mm-hmm. So let's do, before we get to each individual episode, just overall, Lou, thoughts on these two episodes?
Like you, I really like these two episodes. The pieces of all these separate threads are starting to come together. And one of the things that the show has done quite well is it's made me care for all these characters, even ones that I think are ultimately not good characters. So I'm worried for all of them at any given point. And it's just like you just can't help but want to hug all these people because they've gone through such terrible times, and they're all victims, and that just naturally brings out your, empathy for these characters. And I think these two episodes really, really drive that home. And Leander is a dick, and he's a bigger dick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Karen?
I again have to bring up this whole thing that he is the crux of this whole thing, and I hate him.
Yes.
I mean, Arthur Leander is like the worst character in this whole story, but everything that we're watching revolves around him.
If we were doing a Venn diagram, right, he would be the
right
center.
In the center. Exactly
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every single person he has touched in one way or another. Even, through Kirsten, through the prophet, Tyler, whatever, Elizabeth, he's had an impact on everybody. And you see very clearly in Who's There that he is just loathsome. He treats everyone in his life poorly. And you can see that there's a reason why people act the way they do. We see how Clark is in this episode, and you understand, as much as I don't want to like him in that episode, I understand why he's like that. But these two episodes, so crazy good. In the first one, we get more of Jeevan and Frank, and we get to see things. And there are some things in my mind that I have to turn off when I'm watching that episode. Like, how does Kirsten know what happened behind that door?
Yeah.
Because she was not behind the door, but she's seeing it, so there's little things like that. But, getting more about what went on in those first 100 days, very poignant, touching. Again, I feel it. Over these last 3 years, we felt something to a lesser extent, but, this kind of depression about what's happening with the pandemic, and just seeing how everyone is affected by that, very impactful in both of these episodes.
So what I found interesting is if you watch the behind the scenes little snippet on HBO Max, this was one of the first episodes filmed. So that Mackenzie Davis and Matilda Lawler were working together, both figuring out the character. Who is going to be the adult Kristen? Who is going to be the young Kristen? We talked about in our last episode how much we love both actresses, And it is such a joy to watch them interact together. And the filming, right? Like they're in the same clothes in her fevered dream. And the idea of older Kirsten trying to tell young Kirsten, don't put on the play. And at first you don't know what that means.
Yeah.
You know, and then you don't, and then I would have taken 2 or 3 episodes, which is not good, of just the 3 of them in that apartment, you know, because them doing the rap song together, the idea, oh, we're going to be okay, and the other going, we're effed, you know, and the whole trying to do Christmas and her singing a Christmas carol to try to cheer them up, and the older Kirsten knowing what's going to happen. I just, especially on my rewatch, because at first you're a little confused, at least I was on first viewing, what's going on. And then once you understand that this is both a flashback and a dream, and you do have to hand wave that, you know, she wouldn't be omnipotent, you know, she wouldn't be all knowing in this fever dream, but it's great. So, Lou, I'm going to start with you. How much different is this? Because you've talked about, and when we get to next episode, I have some more questions, but, you know, is this similar to what's going on in the book? Did they have this kind of background flashback in the book? And what did you think of this time and their play and everything?
As we mentioned before we started, as we get further into the series, I'm having trouble remembering the differences between the book and this show, but I know that I'm pretty sure because the whole thing with the children and that played out very differently, and with Tyler and that, and Tyler and her mother left the airport together, so that's all changed. So this incident with the bandoliers and Kirsten going into this dream coma thing never happened in the book. And so the events that happen in the apartment are told in a much more traditional manner. But they're done. It's done in pieces, so you don't get the whole reveal of what happened there. It sort of takes place over the course of the novel. So that's quite different. And in general, the TV series is tying relationships back to each other a lot more, whereas in the book it's left much more open or diffuse. So you never make the connection, or Kirsten never makes the connection that Tyler is the son of Arthur and the mother of Elizabeth is the mother. That connection is not made directly in the book. It's we know it, but the characters don't know that. So it's left much more open. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So in a way, I can understand why they've done it in the show, because it makes, it has more impact to make it much more open or direct. But in the book, it's left more open, so it's left for you to fill in the gaps in that perspective. So that's quite a bit different. And like you, when this episode started, I was a little confused, especially with the timestamps, because they kept going 55 days and then 75 days and then 32 days. And okay, so it's because she's in a coma or she's like in a fever dream. Yeah. So that's why she's remembering things out of sequence. But I think the way that they did that for the characters works really well. And Javine is an interesting character because he's damaged even before the epidemic strikes. Like, he doesn't have very good social skills, whereas I think his brother Frank does. But of course, Frank's been damaged by this bomb incident that's left him permanently disabled with this bad hip. So that was all really interestingly played out. And I thought the final confrontation scene with the straggler that comes into their apartment was quite well done as well. And in general, the show still it's got this quirky offbeat. Like, the music is kind of weird at times. You're going it doesn't really fit the scene, but in a way it does. So I appreciate the approach they've taken here, and I understand why they've made things more clear or I guess you could say, dumbed it down for viewing audiences, because that's just the way that television works and movies. You have to be much more direct with things because it's hard to infer things. You have to make those connections for the viewer. So I didn't really mind it. It's a different take on the whole situation of what happened in the apartment, and it's pretty heartbreaking. But it's really answers the question of how could they leave his brother behind, because there's just no way that he would have left. Javine would have left Frank behind, and so you kind of knew what was coming. But and I thought the one connection that I don't believe is in the book at all is that's where Kirsten also got her knife from, which I thought was quite a nice touch.
Mm-hmm.
So I just loved. I thought the acting in this episode was phenomenal. I thought all the four principal actors, Mackenzie Davis, Matilda Lawler, Hamish Patel, and Nabhan Rizwan, I thought they all played their characters really well. And there's so many poignant moments in here. My God, it was just, and again, the inventiveness of the costumes that they built, like those masks and the helmets and everything. It was just, and as I said off the top, these people are also damaged and victims that you just can't help but feel empathy for them. And I just like the subtle, understated way that they go about doing all these, the acting and everything as well. So I really love this episode quite a bit.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I love the idea that the change of us telling that they realize it's Tyler. And we're going to talk more about that next episode, but I like that idea. I also love that that's where she got her big old knife from.
That's not a knife.
Yeah, exactly. And then I love that we're not heroin people. We're barely weed people, and the idea that he is so much in either physical pain or even more mental pain, that he is this gifted writer having to be, but base himself, just debase himself as a ghostwriter for an autobiography. And one of the things this series is about art itself. The idea that we need creative things and how important it is, right? Like there's only 3 of them. And Kirsten, I need to see this play. I need to see this book made live. And that they've all read that book and kind of talked about it. Karen, how about you? Thoughts?
Yeah, well, number one, heroin is morphine, essentially. So I can see where he would be dependent on it.
Yeah.
If you think about it that way, it's not quite as shocking.
Yeah.
But I get where Jeevan was, upset about it. I love that line that we're barely weed people. Mm-hmm. I also liked all the connections in that episode, the first of these 2, episode 7. I watched it right after we talked about the last 2 episodes, and then I rewatched it again.
Yeah.
And watching it the second time, I caught so many things. First of all, the only reason that guy breaks in is because Jeevan wants to go look out the other side of the building.
Right.
He opens the seal, he takes away the carts, and he never puts them back. He becomes complacent, and that's why the dude can break in to their apartment.
I thought of that.
So it's his fault that Frank is dead, except for the fact that I think also Frank did it on purpose, knowing this dude would probably kill him and take the apartment. That was the only way that Jeevan would leave.
Right.
With Kirsten, you need her, she needs you, but taking me with you is just going to slow you down. And he knows that Jeevan's not going to take that to heart. So he says, I'm sorry, and lets the guy come at him with the knife. So there's so many little things in this episode that it's like a chain reaction of things that happen. And the fact that, they have to leave a day later because of the play. And so that means that Station 11 becomes this thing that is something that he resents and she keeps hold of.
Yes.
Where right afterwards he says, I thought your play was really good and I almost made you Lonergan and, all this stuff. But you can also see when we saw them in the cabin in the woods, he hated that book. And I think part of it is, this book has led to so many bad things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all sorts of connections that I'm making just in this one episode that makes it so interesting and multi-layered to me. I think this so far has been my favorite episode of the entire series, with the two Kirstens in the apartment. And how many times did I think someone was going to jump out of the windows?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought that's what Frank was going to do. I thought Frank was going to, kill himself, and he does end up doing that essentially. But they're all like balancing precariously, and it's the penthouse of the apartment building.
Yeah.
It's really high, and the fact that Jeevan can just stand there right in that open window and look down, that really bugged me. I hate heights.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but
too.
So many little things that, like near misses. You think something's going to happen and something else happened, and that guy coming into the apartment, my heart just sunk. I knew that was going to be the thing. And then tying it back to, all the other people are going to blame themselves for what happened to Frank. And then, seeing her at the end of the episode, sitting there with Frank, who's long dead, with all the things growing in the apartment. And I think that's almost an allegory of her whole ethos, is that, things live on. My art lives on. And so where Frank is dead, now there's all these plants. Things are living on, things are, what do you call that? Life survives. Life will survive. And I found that really poignant, super interesting, and so many layers. And again, it's show not tell. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but there's not like a whole bunch of explanation that comes through dialogue in these episodes. It's just what's happening. And I too appreciated her. We can see now where her versatility with making costumes comes from, with the toilet paper rolls as part of her helmet. And I mean, how gifted is she to do all that? Now we can see, that's where she gets that from. And a very, very cool episode. And I'm going to leave it there. We'll talk about the other episode in a few minutes.
Yeah, this had so much rich, this 3 characters, really 4, when you think we have the adult and the young together. There is a lot of there's logic problems, right? Like what does she mean that the antidote is in your
pocket.
Put it in your pocket, right? Well, like, is that because that's where it's always been? The idea that very wonderful lighting, the sound, as you talked about, the music is beautiful, really great costuming, that it looks like you would make homemade, and it really does remind you of the Traveling Symphony, right? The way they do costumes. The idea of the 2 brothers going, we need to go. Why? I could see the argument. No, we're going to stay here till we absolutely have nothing left to eat or drink or do anything. It was very scary when the guy shows up, and you're right. He says, because he keeps talking about, you can't take care of both of us, and you have to take care of her. We did get the whole back again. Hello, white girl. little white girl, that was funny. Yeah, just a really wonderful episode that it's starting to put all the parts together.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on this one? Do we want to give a rating and then we go to the airport?
Are we doing ratings?
I can't remember if we do ratings or not. I don't think we do we?
No, I don't think we do.
Okay,
all right. I just want to touch again upon the relationship between the brothers, talking about Kirsten, like about how to look after that, because Frank has more, I think, better social skills actually with kids than Javine does. He's pretty clueless, but
right.
So when they're talking in their native tongue about what they should do with her and all that, I found that again very touching. And the other thing that I wanted to reemphasize is with putting the adult Kirsten in the scenes, even though she's not speaking, you could just tell by looking at her face what's going on, and like it adds that emotional undercurrent that is something that you don't really get a lot. Like in a book, you can have like narration that underscores what's going on in a scene, or character thoughts or whatever. So she was kind of like our narrator in those scenes, even though she wasn't speaking, but she was like this, a fourth eye or whatever. So I thought that device was really quite clever, and just adding an exclamation point to all the emotional scenes in in this apartment, and there were quite a few of them. And for her not to act with dialogue, but just with her facial expressions, I thought, I've only really known her from that Terminator movie that she did, but I thought she really sold me as a really good actor in this episode.
Just as a small example, even not just with her facial features, but just a movement where she steps back so that she can see the front door, but she knows no one else can, and she knows the dude's going to come in the front door. Yeah. She's not even making a facial expression, just she's stepping back into that area, and you can tell something's going to happen because of where she's standing.
Yeah, she was like a lighthouse. She was like a lighthouse in the scene. Yeah, she was. Yeah. That was a really clever use of her.
I recommend, when you have time to binge, *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yeah, I've heard of the series. I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, she's really good in it. Lee Pace is great in it. It's all set in the early, Dell computer kind of area, that kind of early technology, right. And it's really well done. I think she's. And, this is another example that I am guilty of. I think all of us are, is impatient. The story's not going anywhere. Well, why am I doing this? And I don't know if this series would have worked if you had been more traditional storytelling. I think the idea,
just traditional broadcasting.
Yes. Just the idea of this, we're getting a piece here, and then to go, oh my goodness, the mosaic, right? The quilt that we're building of the story really, it pays off in a way that this is more rewarding than if you had just gone this in the second or third episode, right? I would not have, it would have not have been as much.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. My only nit would be,
please.
In the previous episode, if I'm misremembering, you guys can correct me, but to me, it seemed like Kirsten was being overpowered by 3 or 4 people. And in the next episode, that's just not an item at all. Did I misremember that? Or she
was standing in the middle of them. I'm assuming that she took them all on.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what that shot was with all the bodies.
Yeah, the shot of all laying around is that.
Okay.
Yeah, that she had.
I take away my objection.
No, that's right.
No. And she's very dangerous.
Yeah,
right?
Well, we saw that when she threw that knife at
exactly
Tyler, right beside his head. Oh, jeez.
All right.
The one time she misses, thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, right? I think she purposely missed it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
All right. So knock, knock. Let's talk about who's there.
I see what you did there.
Thank you very much. We're back in the airport. And Clark is feeling himself. Clark everyone is aged, and Clark has become the ruler of this small kingdom.
Dictator.
Yes, I could see that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, for sure.
and I know one of the things that, once again, the post scene talked about is they knew they were going to build an airport, and then they knew they were going to tear it apart. And so they are specifically shots of things that in the episode where right at the very beginning to now, there's orange trees. They've grown, they've built up. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're hunting, or are they just are they growing enough crops that they can support themselves? It appears that they have a self-contained community that is safe from the flu. Self-contained. They have water, they have electricity, they have young children, there are schools, everything's going on, but there is a little bit of conflict. We're here. What else is going on in the world? Should we be able to go and help the rest of the world? And Clark's like, nope, we got everything we need here. F the rest of the world. Let's go with this. Karen, we're going to start with you this time.
Yeah. I could see Clark headed down this path.
Right.
We could see that he was going to be that person that inflicted his will, because that's the only way he could contribute. He doesn't feel like he would be picked to be in charge.
Right.
And I think that was his kind of, he has to stay in power. And they actually, when they detail, we can't do Hamlet or King Lear or anything, because that would allow these people to see that I could be deposed, I could be overthrown. And, it's very Kim Jong-un ill.
Yeah.
Anybody over there. It's that kind of feeling that, if we give them any room to think freely, I'll be out. And I think that's in his personality a million different ways. Trying to tell them about, technology from the past. He's making himself invaluable to them. I remember all these things. You don't. Yeah. And I think that's part of why they have that museum there. I think that was him thinking ahead. Well, if I can remember all this stuff, then I will have something that no one else will have. And you also see when they flash back to him visiting his friend Arthur in the past, we see his inferiority complex. And that is, again, carried over into the future, where, he sees that Kirsten is this amazing actress. And I think that's part of why he doesn't want them to perform. He doesn't want someone to be better than him at anything. He doesn't want anyone around him that could threaten him, that could be better than him, because he's dealt with that his whole life. And so I think that we see a lot about Clark in this episode, even though we see the other characters. It kind of revolves around him in this entire episode. We see Elizabeth kind of humoring him, but also, being a leader, letting him think that he's in charge when, she's really taking care of a lot of stuff. Even Miles is, telling Elizabeth, well, I think it's Tyler, behind Clark's back. So, we see his, emperor with no clothes, that kind of thing happening there. And I really, really loved it. Also, the fact that Tyler, we just see that very small scene of him like breaking away from the guards just as just as Kirsten is going outside, and we don't know where that's going to go. And then it pays off big at the end of the episode. He knows that airport in and out. And so he can do all these things in the background. We don't see him setting up all that stuff. We don't need to. We see him breaking away from the guards. We see him leaving Kirsten to where Sarah is recuperating, quote unquote. And then we see the end of the episode. And again, it's just brilliant putting all these things together in a way that we say, aha, at the end of the episode, and how things are made clear. I really liked it.
Yeah. A couple of things that really stood out to me was the nod to acting, right? Like, Clark is suspicious of everyone. So, you have to do the vetting. And so he gives a phrase from Hamlet. And when Tyler can answer it, or David, well, that's Hamlet. Everyone knows that. I would not have known it.
No.
But, that was funny. And then okay, well, then you do a scene. And we know that they have never performed together. We know that Tyler/David is not an actor. But because they both have loved Station 11, and they both have read it so often that they can quote phrases from it, they do a scene from that. And I love the not the movement,
staging,
right? The staging, right?
Yeah,
that
Hello, it's called blocking.
Thank you, Karen. Mm-hmm. So they're blocking, they're doing great. That they get them. And I love the fact that when Clark is talking to her, Tyler's mom, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Elizabeth, I forgot how powerful plays can be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's summer stock at best, but she has that. And then later in the episode, we see they met when she was a young child, and he quizzed her, and she immediately gave an answer back
with the same question.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And it was so part of me's like, should he remember that? No, he wouldn't have. He wouldn't have remembered that, just this thing. But I love the idea that Kirsten, very early, she was gifted. She had that talent. And so that's why they cast her as the child. And then working with Arthur, even though he is a DICK, he is gifted. And even though Clark doesn't think he is, it implies that he is very much not only a big movie star, but also a very good actor, that he's taught her. So the subtext of performing and doing that really helped make this wonderful. Mm-hmm. And then I want to talk a little bit about, the conductor, where they don't let them see each other. Kirsten is suspicious. And rightly so. Mm-hmm. The way her life has been, she trusts no one. But they end up seeing her, and I thought that was a real beautiful scene. So thoughts about that and any other scenes with this symphony? They're going, hey, this is a good place, right? Like, I'm not saying we should quit traveling, but definitely this should be on the wheel, and maybe we should spend a little bit of time here in residence.
Sure. And wouldn't you want to stay there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's shelter. They got food. They got a shower.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
A sewing machine. I mean, hello. So yeah, I understand why. I think Alex wants to stay forever.
Yeah.
But I do think that the rest of the symphony wants to move on after the winter, and make this part of the wheel. I did get that feeling. But
and right, like I can't remember the guy's name, right? But like, I have a sewing machine.
Yeah.
Like just simple, like, do you know how much easier it is to make costumes with a sewing machine?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Also, hello. Could she be any more like Lisa Loeb singing that song with the karaoke machine? That was so great. I was singing. I love that song.
Yes.
You say. Anyway.
Well, and what's also interesting, right, is I'm didn't mean to interrupt, but Clark going almost condescending. This was a karaoke machine. Like this, like, see how important I am? Lou, I know this. And they're going, you mean like the Traveling Symphony? Yeah, they played music. Right. They're live music, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that he has that little temper tantrum and he goes, okay, fine. If you want to use it, it'll be in the museum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he, I'm going to take my ball and go home.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. And the fact that Kirsten gets to see Sarah, I think she has seen a lot of shit.
Yes.
Kirsten.
Absolutely.
She saw Frank being not ill, but, infirm.
Yeah.
And then him dying, not right in front of her, but she saw his body. She saw the other guy's body.
Leading to death, yeah.
Right. Jeevan left her at some point, and I'm assuming we'll see that in the next 2 episodes. Her parents, her brother, even Gil, and the pregnant member that we saw leave in the first episode. So for her to have this moment with Sarah, I think was super important for her.
I agree too.
If she had died and Kirsten hadn't had a chance to talk to her, I think that would have damaged her even more than she is damaged now.
Yeah, and I think, like, she's if not a mother, she's a big sister, right?
Yeah.
Like the Traveling Symphony has become her new family.
Right.
And she has lost so much in this. It's great.
Going all the way back to when she was a very small child. And they even dropped that little hint in here that her life wasn't good.
Right.
Arthur says that her life is very sad.
Yeah.
She's always kind of been a tragic figure, apparently. And she seemed to kind of thrive in this kind of it's a pressure cooker almost, where she goes around to communities and tries to give them levity, and she doesn't know what might be happening. She's prepared for the worst. There's all these forces that are conspiring with the red bandanas, and there might be looters, and she's seen that firsthand from the very start. So I love that she got that closure with her, knowing that Sarah's going to die. She might not like it, but she understands it's inevitable.
Right.
And that is enough for her to say, okay, I'm not staying here.
Yeah.
And so when Tyler gives her that option, this will take you back out to the yard and this will take you outside.
Right.
And she takes the outside. She goes out. She's going to leave her family because they've bought into it. And she can't buy into it.
Right.
She can only see heartbreak down the road for them.
What do you think? What did Tyler blow up? Just the museum, just the part, like, he did not destroy their food sources, their power, their water, anything. He just destroyed that part that had become kind of
obsolete.
And his kind of kingdom.
Right.
Clark's kingdom.
The stuff that makes Clark valuable.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that was his way to say, look, stop living in the past. And this stuff isn't good. These kids don't need to see what happened in the past. They need to make a new future. And I think that's his way of doing that.
And the irony is the kids don't really care about that stuff anymore.
Right.
No.
Like, you know how it's like with your own kids, you try to get them interested in something that you like. They have no interest in it. Like with my son is totally into, all this anime stuff and stuff that I find really like out there. But if try to sit down and watch a conventional TV show with him, he has no interest in that. And these kids in that classroom, they had no interest in the karaoke machine. And we know that it's probably that's true for everything else that's in that museum, that Clark and his generation are trying to hold on to the past. But the next generation, that they have no interest in any of that stuff. There might be the odd kid that's got like a history bug or something like that they want to know about this stuff. But for most people, they don't care about what a lot of the stuff from the previous generation, because it's either outdated, it's not of any use, or something better has replaced it, or life circumstances have changed so much that that stuff is no longer relevant. And they have no context for it because they didn't grow up with it. So I found that part of the episode interesting. It has echoes of The Stand in it for me when when the Boulder people are trying to get the civilization going back up again. And King famously talks about how he was blocked at that point in the writing process, just because the people were basically going back on the same path, and he didn't know how to progress the story any further. So it took him a while, but he finally realized that he had to blow it all up. And basically that's what happened in this episode as well. So I found that rung quite true for me as well. Like Tyler, maybe he has the right idea, maybe he doesn't. But the irony is that it was already basically blown up because the kids weren't interested in it anymore. So, but this has totally erased that connection with the past, which is always tragic. So, the other thing I really sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Well, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you think a lot of that is just he wants to get back at Clark for saying he has to get rid of Elizabeth and Tyler, like back in the past?
Probably resentment plays a big part in that. And I think the Station 11 graphic novel also informed his thinking as well. He probably looked at that and he either disagreed or agreed with the message, and I think he disagreed with it. So that's probably part of it. Did I answer that for you, or
that's part of his motivation is getting back at Clark.
So I'm going to continue that. Lou, let's start with you, and then I want to hear Karen's. What do you think Tyler is trying to accomplish? What is his motivation? And is he a villain, or is he a hero, or is he a little bit of both? And Karen, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Both.
Yes.
I mean, like any other human being, he has motivations. He carries them out. Are they all right? To him, they are.
Yeah,
but not to other people. Does that stuff matter ultimately? No. That stuff in the museum doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not going to encourage this, but if we were to lose a museum, our lives would continue. That it's just stuff. Right? There's hardly any physical thing that your life would end if you lost it. So losing that stuff in the museum doesn't do anything except for to Clark. He loses his power. Everything else, I mean, they're impacted, but life will go on. To Clark, it's a death knell. And I also like that he wanted to destroy everything, essentially. He sets fire to that memorial. He's the one that interacted with that plane. He brought the guy in. He believed that they weren't doomed. He set fire to it to kind of, make sure that those people didn't die in vain. He made a whole thing about it. And for Clark to make that memorial and to, take credit for everything, that again, it angered him. And I think that was a lot of his motivation on both sides. There is no past, and there needs to not be a past. And I think that's what he was going for with Gil too, because Gil was writing that, history. And also he hates Clark. Clark was plotting to get rid of him and his mother, and he overheard it. And, that was his entire motivation. And I like that we see that happening, see that he is a person. He's not this villain that we've thought he was. He just is misguided and also not misguided. And you have to think also, his learning ended at age 13, 14, whatever he was.
Yeah.
He's still a kid.
Yes.
He made a kingdom with other kids.
Yeah.
So he's still that little boy in that body.
Very Peter Pan-ish, lost boys, except lost children in this case.
Exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, you can't expect him to make decisions like other adults would. So, I took so many things from his actions.
Lou?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that, in the flashback, we saw that Clark was insulting Arthur about his parenting skills, and Elizabeth and Tyler were sitting there. And they've done this in the other episodes as well. But Tyler's got his earphones on, so you're never sure about how much is he actually hearing of any of these conversations. You have to think that particular conversation he heard. I liked his response to when he said, "He's my uncle."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that kind of summed up his opinion of the guy right there. So, Tyler is definitely the hero of his story, but he's also the villain. I think his intent of burning down the museum was, from his perspective, was the right thing to do. I think the lesson that he's forgotten or never had to learn yet is that without history, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes again. So by eliminating that, he's taken away that hope. We're living through it today. We keep making the same mistakes, and we still have the history, but we don't seem to, we don't place enough respect or perspective on things that we could learn from history. But in this case, it's totally gone. So that lesson is not going to be there for them to learn. They probably will pick it up going forward in different ways, and different people, perceptive people, will say, "Hey, what we're doing right now is going to lead us down the same path as to what we went to before." But he's an interesting character in that perspective. His hatred for Clark is something that, when we started to talk about this episode, I mentioned off the top that I jokingly said that Arthur Leander is an asshole.
Yes.
But this episode also tells us that Clark is just as much as one as well, because both of these men are their biggest sin is pride. They both think that their life is the better life, or the only life of value. Clark has added grist for the mill because, from his perspective, Arthur just fell into his thing. He can't stand the fact that Arthur is a great actor, but he hasn't done the work to earn that standing. Yeah. Whereas Clark's, from his perspective, I think we understand that he had to work hard in the business side of things to get to where he is. And we've all been through that in school. We all know the kids that don't seem to have to study and yet get 90s and 85s or whatever, whereas we have to work our ass off just to pull off a 75 or an 80.
Yeah.
So that's a common feeling of, or perspective, that a lot of us can understand. But Arthur's pride is just as bad as, or Clark's pride is just as bad as Arthur's. And as you get older, you get more set in your ways in that. And he's become a total dictator in the airport. He doesn't want to. Dictator. Yeah, he doesn't want to open up the airport to. Now he doesn't even want to open it up to this traveling symphony. They said they're going to have to keep them as prisoners. Elizabeth makes a comment about people are thinking about opening up the airport to everybody, and he's totally against that. So it's funny that the people that we most often hate in life are the people that we most closely resemble. Like if we look in a mirror. So I think it's interesting because up until this episode, kind of liked Clark. I thought like he saw the value in Miranda. He liked his friendship with her. Arthur doesn't even know that Clark's gone sober.
And then doesn't change. I mean, he just, and later, now it's on Arthur that he fell back, like he slipped, right? Like, and then he went crazy. You show him with it looks like cocaine.
Yeah. 8 balls. Yeah. Cocaine.
Yeah. And it just looked, horrible in front of the kids, right? And then Arthur's like, "Oh, you want me to get rid of for your family? Oh, your family's already there." Yeah, Clark does not come across likable at all in this episode. Shows his ugly side, and you do wonder how much Tyler David picked up. How much had they heard, and then how much. I do think it's interesting in that. Both him and Kirsten, the graphic novel has been their Bible, but like the Quran or the Bible or any other holy book, there's always a holy text. Depending on which way you read it, you can go to different paths. And I think there's a common ground. I certainly could understand Clark going, we can't have open borders. Because will we be able to afford, will we be able to support? Is there stuff? Is there enough? Can our crops support more people? But I also agree you don't have to have closed borders. I also, my feeling is that this flu has now, like, it's done its damage. Anyone who's lived is now immune. And therefore, all their
mutated.
Their descendants have that news. So this is not the reason for having a quarantine doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
There's a reason.
Well,
it's because Clark doesn't want people in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's reason. Exactly.
Yeah. For sure.
I think that's the whole reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also another aspect of that, and this is a nitpick I have of the episode, because in the last episode we saw the traveling symphony, somebody, the big guy with the beard, told Alexandra that Kirsten protected her from the prophet. But when they reunite, there's no reconciliation about that. Like they're so happy to see each other, which and that was another touching moment. Like when they all, they all realized Kirsten was there, and they all, yay, and then of course, but then there's that bittersweet ending where Sarah's not there. So that was my only kind of nitpick with the episode. But this episode just does a great job of not overtly spelling things out for you and leaving some things open to interpretation, like Tyler with the headphones, which has been a running thing going through it. When we need to know that he's hearing something, they make it pretty clear that he's actually hearing it. But the other stuff they leave up to your interpretation. So I really like what they did in this episode quite a bit.
So I know we've gone long, but a couple other points. I don't understand how they have the technology or the capability to manufacture a sign like that. I was like, where do they have some kind of factory somewhere in there?
Well, they have a workshop there, right?
Okay, so
repairs
maybe that's
for the planes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to repair planes.
And somebody must be gifted.
Okay, that makes a little sense. Yes.
Yeah.
You would think there'd be some kind of there would be a medical facility on a major airplane, that there would be like and you would hope that there would be if not a doctor, a nurse, or somebody that had, strong things.
EMT? An EMT even?
Yeah, exactly. I loved Tyler and Elizabeth's reunion. I do think in one way, Clark was correct. And why did you cause this pain so much? This your mom has grieved for you all these years.
Yeah.
And it was good to see. I was glad for that reunion. Very emotional. And we end the episode with a bang.
But it wasn't a good vibe. Quickly turns to
no. Yes.
They were both afraid of him or angry. Like Clark got angry at him quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I thought the last shot with all the kids moving towards the airport was quite chilling.
Yes, very much Children of the Corn or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about this episode we need to discuss?
No, I just one thing I wanted to point out that I forgot about from the other episode too is in the book it's a little more international because all the Chicago scenes took place in Toronto. Like Arthur's last performance was in a Toronto theater.
Okay,
so that's a small thing for the Canadians out there because
very nice.
Emily Mandel is Canadian, even though she's moved to the States now. But yeah, so there's a bit more of an international flavor with the story, but that's fine. It doesn't play a big part or it doesn't change anything.
Okay,
I don't know why they changed it. It was unnecessary, but they did. So whatever.
And so we have 2 episodes left. So we'll get to wrap that up and see if we think they did a good job. It sounds like they have steered some details away from the book, but still kind of close to what's going on.
Yeah, the overall theme of all these people being victims and trying to rebuild their lives is still there, and the threads between past, present, and future. Okay,
good. All right,
they just made it a little more blatant.
Yeah. All right, Karen, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
I'm at Oliveria on many different social media platforms. And also my blog is alliestuff.com.
Very nice. Lou?
Before I do that, I just want to take a little sidebar here. And Jesse, if will indulge me, is because we talked about it before Karen came on. For all the Stephen King fans, there was some really big news on the Dark Tower front, that project which had a failed pilot that was done by the showrunner of Walking Dead, and I'm drawing a blank on his Glenn Mazzara, I believe is his name. Yeah, so he did a pilot that unfortunately didn't sell, but our current favorite Stephen King adapter is Mike Flanagan, and he's just leaving Netflix, signed a new deal with Amazon, and he before he did that, he had acquired the rights to the Dark Tower. So, given his adaptations of Gerald's Game and Dr. Sleep, we are all quite excited for whatever may come out of this. And, it's still early days and it might not get picked up in that, but I can't think of anybody better at this current time to adapt that series. And that would be something I would definitely want to podcast about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I loved Midnight Mass, and as you go back and if you guys haven't heard us discuss about it, I urge you to, if you haven't seen the series, watch it, and then I hope you enjoy our discussion. He appears to be a very gifted storyteller.
Yep.
No matter what his genre is. This is one of the King's books I've never read. I've never read the series, though I've been told you got to get through the first one and then it really starts clicking. Yeah. I'm sure I will sometime, but I think that when Amazon wants to do something well, they do it well, like The Boys, right? Mm-hmm. That is very violent and very gory, but it is really good storytelling.
Yeah, it's not in spite of the gore.
And so Man in the High Castle, I really enjoyed that series. So the idea of this storyteller taking what is a beloved Stephen King project that has never been done correctly, to have him do that would excite me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And with his adaptation of Gerald's Game, which is basically an end-head story for 90% of the novel, the fact that the Dark Tower is such a cross-genre story that if you think of Clint Eastwood's Man with No Names crossed with Lord of the Rings, crossed with Salem's Lot, then you've kind of got It's a bit of the
Yeah.
vibe. King calls it a minestrone story. So it's, so if anybody could do it, it'll be Flanagan. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think great news.
I'm just getting into that age where am I going to be alive to see all of this?
Sure you are.
Yes,
Sure
I know.
So that's what we're. Anyhow, thanks for that sidebar. And
no,
people
I
can
agree.
find us on Lose Reviews, where you'll find this podcast under the JKLM playlist, along with our Babylon 5, Stephen King, and Writer podcasts. And I'm on Twitter at Lou W. Sitzmo or S King Podcast.
Very nice. All right. Well, listeners, thank you. I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll plug my newest podcast, Perfectly Good Podcast, where Sylvan Groth and I are going through every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order, A to Z. I would love for you guys to check that out. We have just started the journey, and we are starting to have a lot of fun as we get to know each other and do more discussions.
What letter are you on?
We're still on A. We've only had like 8 episodes. It's been fun. I am I'll hold this till next time, but because I've been so thrilled that you guys have loved Station 11 as much as I have. This has been great.
Mm-hmm.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, cliffhangers. All right. We will see you again next week. Thank you, guys. Be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
And scene.
The proceeding has been a JKL Media production.